do that. It's hard not to come here and be like, this is way different than what I expected. What we are told it feels like everybody's learning that now. It's rapidly, it's like, and we're contributing to that literally right now with the show of, I think we're all realizing it of like, oh, these stereotypes we had about what China is and how it.
这条视频最有意思的地方，不是他们又夸了中国什么，而是他们开始承认，真实中国比西方想象的复杂得多。这几个美国播客主前面已经被中国的电动车、高铁、移动支付和城市效率震过一轮，到了深圳这一集，他们的语气变了，不再只是哇这里好现代，而是开始讨论更难的问题，年轻人的压力、教育竞争、工厂工作强度、供应链、地方债、审查规则，还有普通人到底怎么生活。所以这一期不能做成简单夸中国，我们要讲的是一个更有说服力的判断。外国人亲自来中国以后，最重要的变化不是他们变成中国粉丝，而是他们发现西方那套简单叙事解释不了一个有压力、有问题但还能高速运转的中国。如果只捡深圳高楼和友好路人，观众会觉得这是旅行滤镜；如果只捡高考、996和审查，又会落回西方熟悉的负面模板。真正值得做的是把这两面放在一起。一个国家的活力和压力往往来自同一套运行方式。
And then did Chengdu, and then did Chongqing, and we were here in Shenzhen, and it's kind of appropriate, like what the skyline is here, which is that it's just buildings. This city is just an absolutely insane amount of building. This used to be a mud flat.
Some guy told me that. I'll tell you the basketball story in a second, where I was at last night. But they said, yeah, it used to be a really small village, small fishing village. And now massive. I was counting out my window. I can see 14 cranes. Literally 14.
There's oh my God, there's literally 5 over there.
Wait, this is actually for people who didn't read the book club. So Shenzhen, the reason we were interested in this is like the high tech and electronics capital of China and kind of the world, including the broader area in the surrounding regions, not just Shenzhen. But this was the first special economic zone that our boy Deng Xiaoping created.
He's our boy.
This is basically where capitalism kicked off in China. And then this literally used to be a small mudflat fishing village and has just gone up like absolute fucking crazy. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but we went to...
先看深圳，他们站在深圳，第一反应就是这座城市太夸张了。满眼都是高楼和起重机，而他们听到的背景是，这里过去只是泥滩、小渔村，现在却成了中国乃至世界级的高科技和电子中心。这就是深圳的冲击力，它不是一个景点，而是一种时间压缩。几十年里，一个地方从小渔村变成电子产业中心，这件事本身就会让美国人意识到，中国的变化不是口号，而是直接写在城市天际线上的。但这期真正好的地方是他们没有只停在震撼上。接下来那个夜晚篮球场的故事就把中国的两面放到了一起。
I was out, after 10 p.m. in a city.
Yeah.
Probably could not do this safely in the part of town I'm in of Los Angeles. Just walking. I could probably do it, but I would feel something. Not only was it well lit, vibrant, bright, and this is the most glaze I'm going to give to China on everything. This was a truly magical experience. There was old people out exercising, shirtless, like on monkey bars and exercising. People were playing ping pong. People were playing tennis. I walked into a restaurant. People were super friendly. And then I go to the basketball court, and it's a bunch of like final 2 months high schoolers. They have to do the Gaokao test in 2 months. And they are just grinding basketball, having a good time. I sit down in the corner, and then one of them knows English. He asked me to come play because they need one more. I play 4-on-4 basketball for the next, 2 hours till the light shut off at midnight. They just keep shouting NBA players at me. Anytime I make a shot, they go, Steph Curry! Or
you do have a striking resemblance.
I don't. Luke Kennard, they kept saying I look like him. And... then they all added me on WeChat, and they found my YouTube channel from my username on WeChat, and it's a challenge in China right now. And they all said, they said, this is like our one break a week. This basketball that they play at this night, outside of that, they're grinding studying.
I'm wondering what she thinks about fostering an environment that is so good for young.
他晚上10点以后，一个人走去深圳的篮球场。他说，在洛杉矶某些地方，这样走会让人不安。但在深圳，他看到的是明亮、热闹，老人锻炼，年轻人打球，餐厅里的人很友好。这个画面很有感染力，因为它不是宏大叙事，是一个外来者的身体感受。可同一段里又有另一层，那些高中生2个月后就要高考，他们说这场夜里的篮球是1周里唯一的喘息时间。你看，这就不是完美中国了， 它既安全、热闹、有活力，也有非常强的考试压力和生活压力。这才是真实中国，不是一个滤镜，也不是一个标签。这也是本期最应该保留的反差，也是观众愿意继续看下去的地方。
So I think a number of the people we've spoken to in these more recent conversations have been younger, and we're getting a feel for the maybe difficulties of young people right now in the current economic state of China. And I figured we could start with the conversation that you had last night with an employee that works at Huawei or used to work at Huawei.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are two friends of Stefix, our lovely, wonderful interpreter, and they all went to UCSD together. So I thought this was particularly unique in that these are folks who grew up in China. One of them went to high school in Minnesota. And the other just went to UCSD. And then Stefik was the only one who was able to stay in America and get a job. The other two wanted to stay and could not. So first off, I thought that was interesting. And I expressed the stupidity of our current immigration system where we welcome people from around the world to get a great education in America, and then we kick them out because they couldn't find a job quickly enough. And it's like, what the fuck are we doing? So they both came back here. They're both 25. One is working in Hong Kong now. Is basically like a product manager for like aviation type stuff. And then the other is working at Huawei, doing sort of like technical review type stuff. I think this is interesting in that it's not like a crazy job for either one of them. It sounds like it's typical white collar stuff. If you went to university, you got to like work at a company and have a nice gig. I'll list out a bunch of the things that we talked about, but I think the high level thing that really struck me is, dude, we're all the fucking same. At one point I said, okay, so for young people right now, how do you guys feel about dating? Because in America, everybody's feeling very frustrated with it. They're drinking less. People are getting sick of dating apps, and it's like hard to find third spaces to connect with people. So they're increasingly online and feeling lonely. And they're both like, it's exactly the same here. It is exactly the same. It's just, the older folks we've talked to who are, let's say 30, late 30s or old.
然后他们聊到年轻人，他们接触到华为员工，在香港工作的年轻人，从美国大学回来的中国学生，最后得出的感受很朴素，原来大家都一样，找工作难，选择少，竞争强， dating 很难，年轻人越来越孤独，这些不是中国独有，也不是美国独有。这段很重要，因为西方看中国，经常把中国人看成某种政治符号，好像每个人都只是体制的一部分。但当他们真正和人聊天以后，发现中国年轻人也是普通人，也有焦虑，也会吐槽工作，也在想未来。
It's way more intense than American education or European.
There's like 3 big exams from my understanding. You have the first one you encounter is the Shuokao. I'm not pronouncing. Shaokao.
Thank you,
Shaokao. And you take that one to get into the equivalent of middle school. And then there's the Zhenkao, which is the one you take to get into high school. And then there's the Gaokao, which decides, likely what college you go to. And it's interesting because I think the outside perspective is often the Gaokao is this very intense thing, which it is.
Yeah.
But the Zhenkao has come up almost way more, like its importance in place in the intensity of the education system and what it sets you up for in those high school years has come up a lot. Apparently, there's a recent change in the last year where if you're in the bottom 50% of Zhenkao performers, you're going to go into a vocational or trade high school instead of a more academic one. Apparently, it was a little always like that, but now it's the top-down decision from the government is we need to funnel more people into these vocational roles. And also, what's come up a lot is through all of these tests, the positive things we've heard about it from a handful of people is back in the day, it's a very meritocratic system that people, no matter where they live in the country, no matter what their income status is, if they grind hard enough, your scores on these tests can dramatically change your life and put you into the best universities, into the best jobs. And there's a very definable pipeline there. But as time has passed and as wealth inequality has climbed between the richest and poorest, even though the quality of life for the poorest people has improved considerably, the abuse and like arms race of how much you need to study to succeed on these things has dramatically changed. So what we learned from like this 29-year-old guy who used to work in real estate is even 10 years ago, around when he was taking the exam, he was like, I did study hard, but I didn't have to study as hard as the kids do now.
I asked him that. I asked the kids last night that, and they said it gets harder every year. That's what they
we're
said.
talking, by the way, we were talking about kids who going into high school in like 9th grade, 8th and 9th grade are spending 2 years where almost every day, almost all the time, you are grinding tests because otherwise you aren't going to get to go to a high school where you get a higher education. You get forced into a vocational school so that you can end up in a factory. That's for fucking 8th and 9th graders. It's like 2 straight years. I just want to underscore how intense this is compared to what we.
教育那段更明显。中考、高考、职业分流，这些内容让他们意识到中国的教育压力比美国和欧洲更激烈。他曾经给很多人提供了一条努力改变命运的路径，但随着竞争变贵、辅导变卷、家庭投入变大，这条路径也变得更沉重。所以我们不能只说中国效率高，也要看到效率背后的代价。一个社会能高速运转，往往不是没有成本，而是成本被很多普通人承担了。
The hours that people work as like the standard at whatever job people are at are pretty extreme. Like we were talking to the factory owner, and it sounds like most people at the factory that makes clothes, everybody there comes in 6 days a week, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and also often work overtime. And then with people in the offices, they drop a day. They work like 5 days a week.
You said 5.5.
Yeah, he said 5.5.
So it's like you're still going in on a Saturday. You just get to have the evening to yourself.
Yeah, and then I think that's carried through. Like even the one kid who was talking about making 10,000 yuan a month from doing delivery, he is working 7. He literally said he works 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And I do not think there's a single person I've talked to here where they're not verging on like the 966 thing that you hear about Chinese work hours seems to be very true from talking to everybody.
我们以文化
996
9 to 9, 6 days a week. Yeah, it's brutal hours. And wait, sorry, keep going. Sorry.
I mean not literally 9 to 9 every day, but the most people working at least 9 hours every day, 6 days.
Oh, the factory. I remember so we toured the factory, and yeah,
Wait, what's the context? What is this factory for people that don't?
工厂和996那段也是一样，他们和工厂主、外卖骑手聊完后说，关于中国工作时间的很多说法似乎是真的。工厂6天制加班，外卖骑手1周7天，很多岗位都很拼。这段不能回避，因为如果只讲中国供应链强，却不讲劳动强度，就会显得像宣传。真正有力量的说法应该是，中国供应链强确实有制度、产业和基础设施原因，也确实有普通人高强度工作的原因。
Their business. And he said that they're more cost competitive than people think because of the supply chain infrastructure that's been built up in China. He basically said like there's so much infrastructure and so much supply chain knowledge here, which was something that was super highlighted in Breakneck, that book we read,
right.
That because that doesn't exist in those foreign countries, we can remain relatively cost competitive with the factories that start up there that aren't owned by Chinese companies.
Right.
Yeah, some examples he gave were, let's say you need a specific type of fabric. He calls somebody and in 2 days, a massive amount is delivered to his factory, right? You can't get that in other places. They would have to do a whole giant supply chain thing. Special parts, custom washes, like for your guys' clothes, like if you need a specialized thing to make clothes look a certain way, or, you know, special metal pieces that are custom designed, like all of that can be done instantly in this broader area of China. Like everybody making the fundamentals are here, so everybody can just pass it to each other super fast.
Dude, the big thing was the tariffs. He talked about the tariffs and how they impacted his business. You know, there's this sense, I think, on if you were like against Trump in America, which I am, but you would say something like the tariffs are only hurting people in America. It only increased prices. The truth is, it did hurt. It hurt factory owners in China as well, but the jobs just didn't move to America. That, like, his takeaway was that their business slowed down 20 to 30%. And that they had to find ways to cut costs or whatever to try and make it competitive. However, he also mentioned that to get around that, either factories were at that time moving to, you know, different in-between countries, or we went into more details on like, and this is like stuff we heard from either other people, but like of the ways people avoid tariffs altogether by shipping through.
Yeah, he was saying like big companies that produce a lot of like standardized blanks would send like a shirt that doesn't have one of the sleeves on it. And then they would send, like thousands of that shirt to a factory in Indonesia where they would sew the last sleeve on it and then change the label.
Yeah. And now it's an Indonesian shirt.
Now it's an Indonesian shirt
and the tariff's
you don't have
lower.
to pay the tariff.
Yeah. I have my issues with Trump, but he has been a job creator for Indonesia. For Indonesia. I just want to underscore this. According to this man, to Andy, who we spoke with for a long period of time, none of these companies were like, there's tariffs now, we should set up shop in America. They just moved to cheaper.
They just found cheaper places.
South Asian countries. It's like, what is the fucking point?
He was talking about some of the consequences of AI in this industry too, or the consequences of AI that he expects. He seems like a pretty pro AI guy, but he said one of the things that these large
接下来才是本期最硬的产业段。工厂主告诉他们，中国供应链的厉害不只是人工便宜，而是基础设施、供应链知识和产业配套太深了。你要一种面料，一个电话，2天到厂；你要特殊配件、定制工艺，周边就有人能做。所以关税没有把工作带回美国。关税确实伤到了中国工厂，但工厂不会因此搬去美国，而是去更便宜的国家，或者通过第三国完成最后一道工序。美国以为加关税就能让制造业回流，现实却是供应链不是一个按钮，按一下就能搬家。这就是西方误判中国的地方，他们总把中国制造看成低端劳动力，但中国真正难替代的是一整套产业网络，人、厂、路、港口、配件、经验、交付速度，这些东西合在一起才叫供应链。这一段其实也解释了为什么美国越打越焦虑。美国以为自己卡的是价格，结果碰到的是网络。以为自己针对的是某个工厂，结果面对的是一整片产业生态。供应链一旦长成生态，就不是换个国家、换个标签、换条航线那么简单。它背后是多年积累出来的熟练工、供应商、工程师、物流和信任关系。
Collecting taxes for local governments is not something they've built a great infrastructure for. They're not pulling in a lot of income tax money. And so a lot of the way that local governments in China are funded is through selling land or renting land out to be developed. And so they had an enormous incentive to do as much development as possible. And so what they would often do is they would set up a shell corporation from the local government, which would then borrow money to either purchase the land if they needed to purchase it to be developed, or to loan to developers to start developing. And the problem with that is that the thing you are creating, if it doesn't continue to go up in value, you can no longer pay back that development money. And so as everything was sort of working while prices continue to go up, but as prices are now declining, these local governments can no longer profitably rent out any of this land. And so they can't fund a lot. Like you were saying, bus services were getting shut down in some places, and like it's just becoming more difficult for them to fund their thing. So the central government has to step in and like buy a lot of this bad debt off of their books, but it's becoming this sort of chaotic problem.
And he also explained that the local, it sounds like from what I'm gathering across more conversations, is corruption at like a local government level is still relatively rampant. And the central government is doing their best. And one of the things we've heard Xi be like praised for, criticized for in some other ways, is the cracking down on this corruption within local governments. And the local government appointees have a large incentive to continue building and continue taking out this debt because it was one of the major metrics that they were judged
to get promoted, yeah.
To get promoted. And if you're in a local government position where you can take out a bunch of debt, build a bunch of stuff, get promoted, you can pass the buck of the debt to whoever the next guy is. So it created this big pipeline of people trying to move as many infrastructure projects forward as possible so that they can go up the chain themselves, and then we'll deal with the debt problem later.
100%. Yeah, that even the guy who was, the most pro Xi Jinping, he was like, he's great, the local governments are still corrupt. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the incentive structure. But now again, I think we have a very similar incentive structure where people in our government overspend because they know the problem is passed to the next person. But in here, it's very concentrated in the local governments where they are just dumping borrowed money on things that that may not make sense. I think the first wave of infrastructure always makes a lot of sense. You build the first train or the first bridge or the first whatever, but
maybe leveraging themselves into a massive bubble, but at least you get massive infrastructure, massive buildings, housing everywhere. Everything is cheap and affordable. It's like I would rather that than what we got, which is no infrastructure, no housing, it's 100%.
I think it's definitely a pro. It's like, okay, well,
if you're going to make a giant bubble, it's like this is one of the more valuable ones. Like one of the bubbles we keep doing is bombing the Middle East, and I would argue that's
地方债和基建那段也很关键。他们讨论土地财政、地方融资、建设冲动、债务风险，这里当然有问题，甚至是很大的问题。但他们也意识到，泡沫背后不只是空账本，也有看得见的基础设施、住房、道路、桥梁和城市空间。这不是说债务没风险，而是说不能只用快崩了3个字解释中国。真实情况更复杂，有浪费，有泡沫，有政绩冲动，也有真实资产和公共体验。所以他们最后才会说，亲自来到中国以后，很难不觉得这里和预想完全不同。无论你原来对中国的看法是正面还是负面，来了以后都会被挑战。
works and what's going on, and even if they like what's going on, they're these hyper nationalists that are biased because, no offense, of a certain interviewee, and it's just, I think just come here. And obviously the caveat of we've been to 4 cities in a
plenty more to see, plenty more to do.
Like 13
Actually, I think it's good to watch Ludwig's tip to tip too. He's seeing a different side of China.
Yeah. Whatever your preconceptions are, whether they be positive or negative, I think if you come here, and it's not as hard to come here as you'd think, they will be challenged in some way. You will learn so much in such a short period of time. And we were kind of making this joke about how, like, well, if you were visiting America and you only visited like New York, Boston, and Baltimore, like how much would you really understand about the country? And it's like, it's true. You would have so much more to understand about what America is like and how people live there. But you would have a way better understanding than not having been at all.
And only having gotten TikToks and, mainstream news in your country. And
yeah, if you're Canadian, like you can go without a visa now. Even if you're American, like it was like a 2-week visa process. I'd just really, really encourage people to go because your mind will be blown in so many ways.
That wasn't exactly as negative as you prompted.
Yeah, this was not the. Like,
I truly I don't have a lot of negative. Like literally, the one thing is it's fucking miserable to use the apps here, and they use apps for everything because the translation is all inconsistent. Like at least on my phone, it's been very challenging. And that's going to get fixed. That's like a current minor thing.
Yeah, the apps and the firewall suck. What I would say is I think the purpose of us coming here, like I didn't come here to, reinforce bad idea, whatever, I came here to find things that are.
这句话就是本期的核心。中国不是西方想象里的单一符号，它有压力，有规则，有边界，也有活力，有效率，有执行力。你越想用一句话概括它，就越容易看错。最后他们聊到游戏限制和网络审查也很有反差，西方听到这些规则会以为中国现实是铁板一块，但他们问到家长和年轻人，得到的答案是很多人会绕开规则，大家也会试探边界，甚至会在午夜发更敏感的内容，因为那时候审查更少。
Somebody who's younger, we have asked, there's a rule in China that you're only allowed 3 hours of gaming per week if you're underage. And all of them are like, no, you get around that.
Yeah, everyone gets around that.
No, you just get around that.
Yeah.
It's one of many things where you hear about these dystopian things in China about like, hey, if you say anything about the government, they're going to pull you over. The police are going to get you. And you get here and you're like, no, it's not that extreme. Everybody, there's rules. And then everybody like kind of skirts the rules exactly like we do.
Dude, it was funny, the guy saying that the TikTok or the Douyin censors are asleep at midnight, so you just go and scroll at night. And
yeah, you post the more charged political content at midnight because then the censors aren't watching.
That was an interesting revelation. A lot of people talking about how the online censors are the most, the things that crack down the most. But because everybody's trying to push the envelope online all the time because your posts will just get struck down most of the time if you cross that. And they find like new words or new pictures or new phrases to describe like different aspects of the government, and like that's the new trend of how that person or thing is labeled. And then as soon as it's struck, like people just move on to the next thing.
Just make a different term.
And there's a mixture of like automated censoring and manual censoring done by staff that are doing it. So at midnight, when the least people are working, that's when you can post.
这不是说规则不存在，也不是说限制不重要，它说明真实社会永远比外部叙事更复杂。制度有边界， 普通人也有自己的生活智慧。结尾那段最适合收住。他们说，去另一个国家，新闻里听到什么不重要，你坐下来和人面对面聊，会发现普通人其实很像，大家都想赚钱生活，组建家庭，有一点空闲时间，共同点比差异更多。
When you go to another country, it doesn't matter what you hear on the news. You sit and you talk with people in person, and people are kind and caring, and we're all good people.
And I will say
underneath.
that the people we met here who have been to America said the same thing about the regular people. Everybody's the same everywhere. Their problems are very similar. The average person's just trying to get by, make enough money to live, have a family, have some free time. Like everyone's trying to do basically the same stuff all over. And everyone has more in common than they have different. And
yeah.
it sounds trite, but it's so true. And you get it on every one of these trips we go on.
Yeah, and just if you get a chance, I would come here for you.
所以这一期真正的判断是，美国播客主这趟中国行最有价值的，不是他们替中国说了多少好话，而是他们把西方那种简单中国想象拆开了。中国不是完美样板，也不是西方媒体里的单色反面教材，它是一个复杂、用力、矛盾，但仍在高速运转的现实国家。这才是最值得看的地方，不是让外国人硬夸中国，而是让他们亲自承认，如果你没来过现场，你可能真的把中国想简单了。